Well, Raphael, I appreciate you taking time to talk today, not only about your podcast, but I also want to touch on the documentary you did recently, only in theaters, about the Laemmle family business, the theaters. I finally got around to watching it. I feel bad I didn't get a chance to watch it sooner, but
Uh,
I thank you for taking time out, especially with everything going on in LA, I'm sure.
yeah, no, thank you. I'm happy to talk to you. And the good news is that while I lived in LA for a long time, and but I'm from New York City, and I'm currently on the East Coast. So
Oh,
so
okay.
I have a lot of. I was actually flying out the day that it all kind of went down, and so I sort of canceled, which was the best thing to do considering the
Sure.
circumstance. But I have a lot of friends who are deeply I mean, everyone is affected.
Yeah.
Many friends have lost everything,
Mhm.
which is hard to even get my head around. But anyway, it's a wild time,
It
and
is, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is a wild time, but I think you have your podcast that you do with actually the subject of your documentary that you did, Inside the Art House. Why don't you, if you could give my listeners just a little bit of how that came about, because you started it about 4 months ago, right? Or a little bit more than that?
Yeah, just a little in September, so 4.5 months. Basically, yeah. The film that I made, let me start there, perhaps, is
Sure,
called
yeah.
Movie Leaders, and it is a documentary about a sort of a hollowed family in the movie business, the Laemmle family. Carl Laemmle, the original Laemmle, was a mogul who started a little movie studio called Universal Pictures a long time ago, and he had this other penchant for kind of really helping. He's sort of a passion for his home country, which was Germany, and saving many immigrants from the effects of World War II. And he essentially, sort of like a Schindler, kind of extricated or kind of sponsored, as it were, over 350 people, and including two cousins,
Wow.
which were the two cousins, that is Max and Kurt Laemmle, who went on to found Laemmle Theaters, which was in 1938. And this has been a family-run business for three generations. And it is significant in that Max Laemmle, one of the two brothers who founded it, is really attributed with having really introduced foreign film to Los Angeles, and to the West Coast, and it being kind of the center of the kind of the film cerebral cortex, as it were. It had enormous sort of um, kind of knock-on effects, as it were,
Sure.
from in terms of influencing other filmmakers, and the family received the French Legion of Honor for what they did to support that is the French New Wave, and they were a part of introducing kind of the Australian New Wave, and there's so many filmmakers in the making of this film that really attributed their careers or to their early inspiration to having seen things at this theater, and or to this family ethos, which was supporting independent foreign documentary film and the filmmakers that make them, and then really nurturing the audiences. It's remarkable. And in Los Angeles, it is not just a movie theater, it's a cultural institution. There's about seven theaters that they have. And I initially approached them because I was so fascinated with this sort of legacy story. The this there's a wall at this theater where they have all these amazing photographs that sort of tell this story. And what happened was I ended up sort of falling down a rabbit hole with them over sort of two very significant years, and that was what we captured in this film. At the end, and the film opened in theaters. It played over 100 theaters around the country, and it was critically very well received in the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Forward, and and on and on. And it was we made it to play in theaters because of in this case my shared passion with Greg Laemmle, about seeing movies in theaters and how
Mhm.
important it is. and I made a movie called Only in Theaters, so that it would play in theaters, not only on streaming, right? So that was the intent. Anyway, at the end of this, which was basically 2+ years of filming and then another year of kind of hanging out with each other as we kind of went around the country to film festivals and to various openings in various cities. Um, we kind of we still liked one another, and which is, saying a lot. And uh, I came to Greg and I said, Greg, what do you think about doing kind of a talk show and or a podcast, but maybe it being a little bit different? Um, to really kind of promote this idea of movies in theaters. And so that's how this kind of that was the spark of this. It came out of our friendship. And then I approached two friends of mine who well, one friend of mine who's now become friends with the other fellow, but
Sure.
his name is Thomas Cassetta and Miles McCreary. They are both kind of sort of the Miles particularly produces Flagrant, which is a giant comedy podcast that
Oh.
gets millions and millions and millions of views per show. And Thomas is the sound mixer. They really were supervising producers for us in terms of sort of creating this vision. But the idea in this case is what we're doing is a 4 camera setup in a 100-year-old theater. The subliminal message is go see a movie in a theater, right? Not, maybe not too
Yeah.
subliminal, pretty liminal. And then we what we do is we talk to filmmakers whose films are opening in art houses around the country.
Oh,
And
nice.
or if not actually the filmmakers, then we talk to sort of indie insiders like the fellow who started Slam Dance, which was Dan Mervish recently, or a historian that talked about the history of art house, or Jeff Lipsky, who's started his distribution career with a little fellow named John Cassavetes, and on and on. So the opportunity to kind of have conversations that are really sort of art house focused for people that love films, but also are curious and or interested in knowing what's going on, what's opening, and how to sort of find it.
Yeah, and I listened to a couple. Actually, I was quite happy you talked to Kurt Ravenwood because I'm based in Wisconsin, and so I'd seen. Actually, we showed it at a festival, film festival. I've been involved in covering indie film for this will be my 13th year now.
Ah,
Um,
that's great.
and we showed it at one of the festivals that I'm part of the committee on. We showed the Lake Michigan Monster film,
Oh, that was
and
I heard reference of that in there, and apparently it's remarkable.
yeah, it's an amazing film for what they did with what they had, and it's Wisconsinites are crazy about their state, so the fact that you have this representation in this film, and it's amazingly crazy, as creative and crazy as Hundreds of Beavers, which I got a chance to see, and I loved that as well. And your documentary, uh, I wanted to go to LA to go to these theaters because
Oh,
having discovered a passion for indie film, and discovering we have actually a rather thriving community here, even in Wisconsin, I just fell in love with it. And so I'm watching this and seeing the trials and tribulations, and I'm feeling it because I love old theaters too. And to see how you covered it, and on one hand, it is very tragic. On the other hand, talk about kind of picking your narrative for you with the pandemic and everything happening while you're filming the documentary. I'm just like watching this going, man, it's like that kind of lays things out for you right there.
yeah,
And it was
yeah.
heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see the challenges, but I am glad they got through it and they were able to hold on because you did well. You did well in keeping me hanging on, thinking whether or not they were going to sell the theater chain or not. And I'm like sitting here, back of my head, going, I know they're not going to, but maybe they are. I hope they aren't.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and listening to your podcast, yeah, I think it's amazing. And I would say during the pandemic, I think some people did discover indie film. I don't know what your findings are, but did discover a little bit more about indie film because they were stuck at home. Hollywood big studios weren't producing anything, but yet indie films were sitting out there and streaming very little views, and all of a sudden I've seen reviews and stuff for stuff that I covered years ago. They're like, "Did you see this indie film?" I don't know if you ran across that at all.
Yeah. I mean, you know, look, streaming is a wonderful thing, and it obviously kept us all alive. It kept our the power of stories, how important it is to be able to kind of go and step in another world. And thank God for streaming when it happened.
Right.
Um, that said, coming out of the pandemic, there was so much ink spilled about movie theaters are over and it's dead, and and it's clear now that they're not.
No.
It's clear now that some of the highest grossing movies ever have happened post-pandemic. Granted, they're big movies, but there is a huge appetite for them. In addition to that, I can happily tell you that Greg ended last year in the black, and
Oh.
and um, and that's wonderful.
Hmm.
And while many theaters closed during the pandemic forever, there are ones that are there, and they are important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I love the shelf that everything you have behind you. And again, God bless you and everything
Right.
that you've done to kind of commit to this, because I believe, you know, Arthouse is where all the cool kids are, really. It's the most creative, most sort of ingenious, most clever and outside the box thinking. And here we are now, as David Lynch just passed, kind of the poster
Right.
child for kind of an auteur, but indie director who obviously moved mainstream and then worked on television, but always had sort of a vision that felt very indie in spirit, and that is not cookie cutter. You can't predict the end at the beginning. It's not a somnambulist kind of just a dream to eat your popcorn. You actually have to sort of lean in and think and feel, and that's what these indie films do, and it's so important for us. As a creative mission, to be able to continue to kind of keep the lights on at these theaters, because these theaters are, for the filmmakers anyway,
Yeah.
they are so important. They are so directly related to opportunities that will then lead to doors opening and
Hmm.
other doors opening. And one of the other happy things that have happened in the past couple of years is that the whole day and date thing kind of crashed and died like the Hindenburg, which is
Yeah,
where
it did.
open it in theaters and online at the same time. And they were like, oh my God, we're ripping up money. What are we doing?
Yeah,
And
thankfully.
now they're realizing, yeah, thankfully, that they can actually, like, hey, gee whiz, we can open our movie in theaters, and it helps, elevate our brand. And then when we get it on streaming, it actually does even better. Thank you, Wicked, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, uh, it's been a journey,
Yeah.
over the past several years. But what's clear is that there is still a desire to see these sort of thinking person's films, and what I'm sort of excited about is that a whole bunch of younger people, again, kind of college kids and millennials or Gen Zs or whatever that alphas or
Whatever
beta.
you want to call them. Yeah.
They're realizing that that this is actually where the really interesting, dynamic, thoughtful stuff is happening,
Mhm.
and it's not just fair for old folks. You know what I mean? The younger generation is discovering it.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see that, seeing them embrace it. I mean, it helps that technology has moved to where you literally can buy the same equipment they're shooting big named, films on. What is that one? The one that's so Steve Soderbergh's got coming out that he shot on basically an iPhone
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
recently,
yeah,
and he did another one, Unsane, which he shot on a phone, showing, yeah, he had a lot of extra gadgets and stuff attached to it, but still at the core, it's like you look at what you've got for pro-am equipment and stuff now, and there's nothing. People can shoot 4K movies, so now they got to learn how to tell a story. Now it's actually those other elements, and they're learning that through indie films, realizing I don't necessarily need a big budget to shoot a film that could still be solid. I mean, you look at, well, we mentioned Hundreds of Beavers. You look at that and what they did with that on a small budget.
He spent 2 years in his kitchen doing all those at his kitchen table, making all
Yeah,
those visual effects. I love that story.
yeah. I mean, it's amazing, and there's others too. There's animated film that's a rock opera where the uh, um, a rock made by Rockstar as he goes by. I interviewed him a while ago. It took him 8 years to make it. He self-taught himself animation
Wow.
so that he could tell his rock opera, and he composed all the music and everything.
Oh my
And
God.
it's Death of a Rock Star,
Incredible.
it's called.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And he just did this out of his home and that, and he self-taught, and that was amazing. And that's what I love about indie film is that all your big name stars, pretty much all of them, had to start somewhere. And they
Right.
cut their teeth on indie film. I mean, for me, I'm a big genre guy, so indie horror is particularly, kind of my niche, and sci-fi and the genre stuff. I do like the dramas too, but definitely like the indie horror. But you look at how many big named talented stars got their first or second, you know, break in a little indie horror film, a little
So
low
years
budget.
ago, years ago, I worked on a Roger Corman movie called
Mhm.
Carnosaur as
Oh
an
yeah,
actor.
Carnosaur. I know
And
Carnosaur.
I'm the star of Carnosaur, I die at the end. But there
Yeah.
was a Carnosaur 2 and a 3, and the movie came out. I think they made it for, I don't know, probably what, 300,000 or 400,000
Yeah.
something like that. And we had an 18-day shoot. It was brutal, and it happened to come out right. It was counter programmed against Jurassic Park.
Oh.
And of course, everyone was like, "Hey, where's the other dinosaur movie?" And they all then flocked to this Carnosaur. And again, Roger Corman is his own universe, right? But there was something scrappy and indie, and we can make this and do it, and giving young filmmakers, as we know now,
Mhm.
a huge opportunities to kind of come up, including Ron Howard and all sorts of people, that's actors and also directors. So independent film really is how you cut your teeth. You don't just wake up and be Scorsese. You have to kind of find your way, and you've got to kind of make things and make mistakes and figure it out. And film festivals and these art houses that then often host many of them are are so important to the life, literally to the beating heart of this industry and to these stories that we all love.
And I have to apologize. I now recognize your face and name because I've seen Carnosaur a number of times over the
Oh,
years. So
that's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
I watch so many films. I'm horrible with
I
that.
can, I mean, again, you don't even have to say that. We just look at your shelf behind you,
Yeah.
and it's,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but you're right. I mean, Tom Hanks did Mazes and Monsters, which I picked up recently on DVD. Jennifer Aniston did Leprechaun for crying out loud. And there's even some of these other like shot on video stuff that some people cut their teeth on, and people turn their heads away. But some of the shot on video stuff, even back in the '90s, is wild. And
Yeah.
they needed to fill the shelves with VHS, so they got these distributors, and people look, oh, shot on video or whatnot. And one of the things I've always tried to emphasize, and I get the gist from your show as well, is that if you can look past maybe the micro budget or the small budget aesthetics, you can find a lot of gems out there,
A lot of gems.
you know,
A lot of
which I'm
gems.
sure you've seen over the years.
Yeah, 100%. And also, here's the thing, and this was part of the inspiration of sort of doing this. So being an independent filmmaker, I didn't have a Netflix marketing budget. There were distributors who were interested, but nothing ever really materialized. So I ended up sort of self-distributing, and I had to self-promote and do that whole road. Now, Hundreds of Beavers also, similarly couldn't get a distributor.
Yeah.
So there are lots of films, wonderful films that don't find a home with a distributor, but it's Herculean what filmmakers have to kind of go through in order to be able to kind of actually get noticed, to get seen, and the marketing kind of uh, acumen that you have to kind of figure out very quickly in terms of being able to promote your film. I mean, there are four hills, right? And of making a movie, and you can die in any one of them. One is pre-production, that's getting
Yep.
your script and getting the whole thing set. That's production itself, which is a killer. Then there's post-production, which is oftentimes is everything. And then finally there's marketing. And you can do the first three and then die in the last hill.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the hardcore realities of this. And of filmmaking, which is risky and challenging. But there are as you say, gems that really deserve attention must be paid. In the words of Arthur Miller, right? I believe that what we're trying to do with Inside the Art House, and of course, it helps to have an extraordinary man like Greg Laemmle there with me, and to have that great backdrop of the theater,
Oh
that's
yeah, it's
the theater,
gorgeous.
which is a 100-year-old cinema, which used to be a vaudeville theater, and but is to really kind of amplify um, these independent filmmakers' moment. I mean, we talked with Sandy Dabowski, director of a beautiful doc called Sabbath Queen, that just opened in New York and LA's gotten incredible reviews. It's going to be having a huge theatrical run, and gorgeous movie. And he spent 21 years working on it. There's a film, a gorgeous film called uh, uh, Vermiglio,
Yeah.
which is now another. It's the Italian. It's been shortlisted as the Italian entry for Best International Film, and the director spent 5 years on it. There's another film called La Cocina. He spent 12 years working on it. So many times these are films that literally, if you can pour your life, if the most valuable thing we have is time, really,
Yeah.
then these filmmakers have poured that precious asset into the making of this movie. And it all comes down to kind of that moment where your movie hits where the rubber hits the road,
Mhm.
where you hit the zeitgeist. Now, of course, there are fabulous stories of, well, hundreds of beavers, or I don't know,
Well, even Terrifier. Look at Terrifier series.
yeah, yeah. There are small movies that become big, but they're more often than not, there are a lot of really sort of wonderful smaller movies that just don't get the attention they deserve.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is help with that.
Well, and it also feels, and I'm fully guilty of it when I was younger, because I've been on YouTube. This is my 19th year now doing stuff
Oh,
on YouTube.
good for
Um,
you! Congratulations.
Thank you. So I've kind of been around it and have seen it grown and go things. But I admit, when I was younger, trying to kind of cut my teeth and make a name and, oh, be that guy, sort of keep up with the Joneses, Art House was kind of used as, well, it's an art house flick. But now I'm
Right,
like,
it was like a dirty word, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but now I'm like, it's an art house film. I love, it's one of those things where I've grown appreciation over these many years, especially the last 13, getting to talk and feature and look at so many indie films. That's changed my perspective with art house. The term art house. It's kind of, if I mean, the closest thing for listeners out there to associate, A24 is probably the biggest art house type studio you could get that's getting the wide release, because they're still doing stuff that I'll be watching in a theater going, I can't believe I'm watching this type of movie on a big screen that's got wide release.
Right, right. No, it's astounding. It's astounding. And how cool that you've been doing this for 19 years, and that you've, really been so committed to making, again, just bringing attention to these wonderful films, and just sort of following your passion.
Yeah, I mean, film has always been a big part of my life, as it seems with yours, to where, I mean, that was the thing for our family to do in the 80s when I was growing up, is we'd go to movies, and my parents wouldn't pay for a babysitter, so they'd take me to whatever movie they wanted to see. So I saw a lot of things I probably shouldn't have at a certain age. you know,
Yeah.
but my first movie they took me to, I was 2.5 years old. It was Star Wars. Now, I don't
Ah,
obviously remember it too much, but they said that they had to force me to go to the bathroom because I had just been potty trained, they said, but I was so engrossed in the film, they said, that I would not move. And
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
yeah, that tracks. So, I saw
It
your
does. It does.
I saw your documentary, and I was listening to the inside the art house, and I'm like, there's someone that has that passion as well, that just comes through on everything that you're doing. And I love that because, especially one of the quotes or one of the things you covered in the documentary was about how movies bring all walks of life together. And I have always said that about movies. That's the magic of it. You can have a movie that's 100 people in the movie theater that are from all different types of political spectrums, whatever, and they'll watch it. And what's even better is each of those people may get something different out of the movie than someone else. Well, they
That's right.
watched the same thing.
That's right.
It's
That's
truly
right.
amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and here we are living in a sort of a time when we know that the sort of depression and anxiety and chronic loneliness are so sort of so ubiquitous, and
Right.
and being able to put ourselves in places where we are in relationship to other humans. I mean, we are social animals, right? And the wonderful thing about movie theaters is, you come in as strangers, and you leave as friends, just because you have this shared experience, right? And there's a point of connectedness, and that's just so important. Technology has given us the ability to be completely alone, and the illusion of actually connectedness, and I think what it's done is it's left huge gaps in terms of our being able to feel
Mhm.
comfortable with ourselves, and so I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but it's as you think about, as I had to think about as I was making Only in Theaters, what would happen if movie theaters were gone?
Yeah.
If they were really, and there was a lot of obituaries written about movie theaters during that time, right? And then a lot of kind of terrible sort of empiric evidence about it, actually, terrible things happening. But at this point, we have to. It's important, not just to recognize the theaters themselves, but also recognize the films that are being made for those theaters,
Mhm.
and the people, the extraordinary minds and hearts that are kind of going into the creation of films, and those four mountains that I told you,
Yeah.
and being able to conquer them, and then find their way to you as you sit your butt in a seat and actually get to kind of have that experience. It's an astounding thing, and again, not to be taken for granted, because it
Yeah.
it it is lightning in a bottle when it happens, when a small film can become a big film.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things on the, I say the double-edged sword with the pandemic was when Hollywood went dry, the big studios, your indies moved in because theaters, when they did open, as you probably very much aware, they needed to fill seats. They needed to fill something. So that's why, like, one year, I think A24 had like 7 movies out in a
Ah,
year. Neon had a couple because there was no big studios. And so they're taking these smaller, either films they bought or they made, putting them in wide release because theaters needed something. And suddenly people are like, their minds are blown. I mean, everything, everywhere, all at once. You look at
yeah, one of the most successful indie films of all times, right?
or even films like Moonlight or Tangerine or whatnot. They suddenly get Oscar buzz, and they're indie
Yes,
films.
yes,
They're
yes.
and I think slowly, and I'd love to see you could agree or disagree. I mean, because you've definitely done your studying more than I have, but just from my experience, it feels slowly like people are changing their opinion of indie films.
I
Either
think they are, because I think, again, they're realizing, there's a term that's become so popular recently, which is about mid TV,
Mhm.
which is this kind of I mean, it's often associated now with Netflix, but it's kind of that, like, it's good enough, and it's not earth shattering, but it's like it keeps your attention and you keep
Mhm.
coming back, kind of thing. And there are obviously huge studios with huge marketing acumen and intentionality, and they put stuff out for people to come find it. I mean, now every once in a while you have a Barbenheimer, which was a freak of a moment
It
where you
was. It was. Yeah.
two remarkably different films with two really interesting directors, but both wildly commercial, as well as also being sort of artistically kind of um, dynamic for very different reasons, right? But the fact is that there is a it takes so much passion for one person to
Yeah.
be able to kind of create, to sort of light a candle in the dark and say, okay, I've got a vision without all of the kind of the bells and whistles, and to be able to carry that forward. And I think, that's where you will discover the antithesis of mid TV. You may not always love it. It may not always be your cup of tea, but I mean, the things that are there, the things that are being created are just by virtue of the fact that they got there are interesting. They're different, and they will make you think, and they will, kind of wake you up a little bit. They won't just kind of put you into hypnotize you with the same old thing. And that's again what's so wonderful about, this art house, that it's there and that it's being rediscovered.
Well, I mean, and film festivals too. I mean, I always attribute my one friend who told me back in 2011 or whatever it was, yeah, about 2011, he goes, "Hey, Mark, did you know that there's a horror indie film festival in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in October?" And I'm like, "We have film festivals in Wisconsin?" Because I didn't know at the time, being a film lover, but it's still, I never thought we're in Wisconsin. Who's going to do a film in Wisconsin? And
Yeah.
and I always love telling the story that that one festival alone started so much. There were filmmakers that met each other that went on to collaborate into doing an anthology film. Many of my friends got inspired and made connections with filmmakers and went on to be involved in making films. I made some really good friends who are some of my best friends today, all that we met at first from that one film fest.
Wow.
And I that's why I always encourage people, even if it's a small film fest, go to it because I imagine you traveling the world in film fests. I mean, that's where it's kind of the intimate setting. That's where you can sit and talk to people, and they realize I'm not the only one that has this passion.
Right. Totally.
You know.
Totally. And you create, as you just said, what such an important thing, which is community, right? Making a movie, the Sisyphean task of trying to push an enormous boulder uphill is so lonely at times.
Mhm.
And so to be able to go and gather with other sort of like-minded, insane people who are, would actually consider doing such a ridiculous thing as make a movie, it is so helpful, and it can mean everything. It can be
Mhm.
just like, the kind of person who can just say that one little thing, when your family is looking at you like you've clearly lost your mind, and they can say, "Oh no, you need to fix that thing in the second act, and then you're fine." And then suddenly it's like, "Oh my God, someone speaks my language." And that's what, again, community is so valuable for, and that's what film festivals is sort of. They literally, they just engender that sense of kind of gathering and let's work together.
And I mean, of course, we're not saying that all of them are cohesive film fests.
Oh,
There,
no,
there
no.
are there are always exceptions to the rules, but
Of course.
I've more so than not come across film fests that I've adored and seen so many wonderful films that some of them are just on the film fest. They never really leave, and then they kind of just fade. They don't even get on distribution, anymore. But they might be on there for 4 or 5 years, and uh and it's sad that they don't get onto the distribution that people, but the fact that they run that long on the festival means they were seen by
Yes.
some people.
Yes. Yes. 100%. 100%. And you know, I, you know, I stand by my conviction that a movie doesn't really feel like a movie until it actually is on a screen. That there's the
Sure.
magic happens somewhere between the seat and the screen in that space in between, where things connect. 50 movies on hard drives that never played theaters. I mean, congratulations on making them. I don't want to in any way sort of impugn that, but I want to say is that it doesn't really feel like a movie. I think most every filmmaker would say this, until it actually plays in a theater in front of
Yeah.
an audience, because it has that event. It's again, it has, it feels like it's immediate,
Mhm.
and it's from an audience point of view. I know that I've walked into movies and felt like my DNA got sort of shifted, got spun around because of something that happened in that room, you know.
Well, well, it's just exciting. I mean, pardon me, folks, for doing the back in the day, but when I was younger, growing up in the 80s and that, when you had kind of the next silver age, if you will, or the next, renaissance of film where film exploded, the blockbusters and all these, Spielbergs and, you know, all these Tarantinos, all of these folks creating these interesting films, they were event films, or Jim Cameron. I remember having to go to a movie theater early to sit in line so I would get a decent seat, because you might not if you show up late. And that was almost every other weekend.
Oh my
you,
God.
you know, when you get, I remember going early to the first showing of Batman Returns because I'd seen Batman and I loved it. And it's one of those milestone films that, I'm sure you have those too, where it's a film you watched and it completely changed your perspective and your love for film just like
Yes.
exploded. Well, Batman was one of those films for me. So when
Mm.
Returns came out, I literally went like the first showing, the first day, the first closest theater, and I was in line like an hour early. And by the time they let us in, it was packed, and it's one of those things where you see that kind of with some of the indie stuff at festivals. It's always great to see when they pack a house. I know a few indie filmmakers who have been able to do that because of word of mouth and that, and it's great to see. But even the bigger studio stuff, you don't see it too much. But you mentioned Barbenheimer. I don't remember seeing a movie in the last, I will say, 10 years, even the Marvel films, where you had the Barbie movie and you had all walks of life, all representations of people, all going to the film, them packing the movie theater, every show, every day for like 2 weeks at our small theater in town. I'm like, people showing up in pink outfits and costumes and dressing up and going multiple times. And I'm like, that's exciting for me. When I see a packed theater for any movie, I'm like, I'm excited and your experience is different.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That was I mean, she didn't get the Oscar nomination that or award that she deserved, honestly, because
Yeah.
it was so creative what she did, so creative. I am, um, you know, that is that is where the lightning happens in a way where it becomes a cultural moment. And of
Right.
course, we know that it doesn't always happen. It's very
Mhm.
rare that it happens. But when it does happen, boy, oh boy, oh boy, is it exciting. And that's what movies can sort of do, particularly movies in theaters.
Yeah, I love when something explodes like that, unexpected. I mean, out of all the movies, when I saw the trailer for Barbie movie, I'm like, nah. And then all of a sudden it just became this cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And even being the genre guy I have, even with the horror movie Terrifier, and I bring that up because that's one of those that he worked for many years before the first Terrifier itself was out. It was like 10 years he was, getting this character and working with him in anthology films and that. And then the first Terrifier kind of got a limited, he found the right, niche, and suddenly it got word of mouth. And then Terrifier 2 actually got wider theatrical release. And then you have Terrifier 3, which is one of the most successful indie horror films,
Wow.
of all. I mean, it made so much at the box office, and he made it for like $2 million, and it made like 10 times that or something, like
Oh my
20 times.
gosh.
I mean,
That's amazing.
it's amazing. And, you discover that stuff with the art house stuff. You're talking about foreign films. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but we just talked about it this week. one of my favorite films from last year was Flow.
Oh yeah, it's such a good movie.
Oh, such a good it's a French film and it's such a good movie. And I'm like, that's a beautiful movie. And now it seems to be getting traction now that's in unfortunately in streaming. I didn't get a chance to see it in the theater because I'm kicking myself though, because I'm watching this going, I would love to see this movie in a theater. So I'm hoping it gets when Oscars come out, it gets a wider release because there's so much beauty in it in its cinematography that I'm like, I want to see this on a bigger screen,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, look, again, we've all become so used to, watching things on our phone, and or our laptops, and or even on our big screen televisions, whatever it is. But there is something, um, there is a there is something about seeing something in a theater that just is different.
It
And
is.
I remember just going back to my first movie after the pandemic when we weren't allowed to, and just feeling like I was like, that remember that cartoon for was it like was it Live or Memorex where the guy's
Yeah.
head was blown and like
Hmm.
coming out of his ears. Like, I felt like that, and I it was it's just something that yeah, I mean I thank God it's still there, and thank God it survived, and thank God it's still going. But it's where it's happening. I mean, and in this case, Greg Laemmle doing this is it's an interesting endeavor because we're not doing these are not reviews.
Right.
We're really just sort of talking with them as
Hmm.
tell us about your journey, tell us about how you made this, tell us what was your inspiration. Beautiful movie called Gaucho Gaucho that we just spoke to the two co-directors about. Um, they have a theatrical and they're going to streaming, but it's a
Oh,
black and white film shot in Argentina about the cowboys there.
nice.
And it's gorgeous
Hmm.
cinematic film. There's another film called Porcelain War, which is about it's actually a filmmaker we spoke to who was a film teacher, but he actually was gonna make a film about this porcelain artist. She was able to do incredibly intricate drawings and artwork on porcelain dolls. And the war broke out. And then
Hmm.
he ended up sort of basically making this film about these artists while they were doing their art and then picking up guns and going to war. And it's now the most awarded documentary of the year. It's been
Wow.
shortlisted. Gorgeous film. I'm Still Here, Walter Salas's new film, which is opening wide, I think, in about a week. Um, the lead actress just won the Golden Globe Award, and it's a stunning movie. Uh, on and on. There are a lot of films that you may not know about, but these are all
Right.
these films that are coming in this case to a Laemmle Theater, but they're also coming to other outlets. And so Greg has made a point of saying, look, this podcast isn't about. It's not called Inside the Laemmle Theater. It's called Inside the Arthouse because it
Right.
really is about these films in theaters around the country.
Yeah, and that's what I've loved too. Even being in the middle of Wisconsin where I'm at, I don't have as much opportunity to see such films, so I do have to see them streaming. But when I can see them at the film festival, and that's why I'm happy to be involved in a film festival, some way, shape, or form, the last 12, 13 years or so it has been, because there's some movies that we get to show on the big screen, in front of an audience to experience it. And it is unlike anything else because you're in a movie theater when the lights go down, hopefully your phone is off. And if you actually just submerge yourself, you are in this other world, this other place for 2 hours, 104 minutes, however many long it is. That's it. That's where you're at. And if you can put the phone away and experience that in the theater, you see so much and you feel so much
Agreed.
energy in the sound or visuals, or even, I don't know, I like seeing anniversary releases of movies, even if they're bigger movies, because I haven't seen them on theater for a long time. And I took my 20 something son to see Psycho, the original Psycho.
Oh,
They were
wow.
doing a run on the big screen, and I watched it, and I'm like, I love this. I knew everything that was going to happen in the film, and yet I was very excited to watch this movie. And he even enjoyed it. Not quite as much as me, but he still
Uh,
enjoyed it. But
That's
watching it
great.
on the big screen, you see stuff you don't see on a smaller screen.
Right. You just don't. You don't, and there's no distractions, and um there's no dinging or worrying, or or even just no. Greg likes to say that even when you have the remote, just the fact that you have it, you know that you could turn it off at any moment, gives you this kind of sense of kind of impermanence in
Yeah.
terms of the connectedness to the actual watching experience. So there's something to be said for really being in a theater and kind of just sort of stepping in and letting it happen. Be a screen that's bigger than you, and where you fall into it. And Yeah, I mean, look, we've been doing this for 4 months, 4.5 months now. Um, we have about 500,000 views on YouTube, and we're approaching 100,000 subscribers. And we're it seems like we're doing something right. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this for any other reason, honestly, than just my passion for movies, and
Yeah.
my desire to want to kind of remind people about these incredible films. And now I can call my friends and say, "Oh my God, you see this?" and "Oh my God, you see that?" and they're like, "Tell us what you should watch." And I'm so excited because I'm sort of on the front line of being able to kind of really recommend things. And so that's again what we hope to be able to be is, if you don't know what to watch, or you're wondering what's coming next, tune in, check it out, look at a clip, see what you think, and maybe you'll discover something that you might not have otherwise, because there is so much coming at us, and this is curated, and again, coming from the best, that is, in this case, the Greg.
What would you say? And I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know it's a little late on the East Coast there, but what would you say, say in the last, say 3 years, what is one of the indie films you saw that just really stood out for you as just one of those amazing theatrical experiences, if you could pick one?
Goodness, there's so many. And I have so many of the recent films in my head at the moment. So I am and I'm a little tired because you say it is a little later here, but I my there are films. um Gee whiz. I'm going to think of six of them the moment we hang up.
Well,
But
that's fine. Didn't mean to throw a curveball. I was just curious what you hit, what you might have stood out for you, but you're right, there's so much out there.
Yeah,
Uh,
what we're trying to do about a show a week, and so that
sure.
means that I'm watching films now pretty
Mhm.
much constantly, I fly out to California to do this, and we do six or nine in a few days, and then we put them out. My head's a little bit
Sure.
full at the moment of all the ones that I've watched. So thinking back 3 years is like, I can't
Uh,
even think. But invariably, the independent films are, look, I love mainstream Hollywood films. They're wonderful movies, and not all of them, and not all of them are a cup of tea. I'm not a big Marvel movie person, although
sure.
some of them are great. But I do I'm interested in if I'm investing time, that you sit with something, and that it's smart and or thoughtful or different enough that it surprises me and or kind of moves me in some way or other. And that's what I'm looking for. That's the experience I'm looking for, and that's why we're doing this. These folks really deserve as much a leg up as they possibly can get.
Well, thank you very much for this. This has been a lot of fun, Raphael.
Oh, Mark,
Uh,
thank you. Appreciate it.
getting to share passion for indie films. I think you've definitely made an argument of where there's room for both. You can enjoy both your indie and your Hollywood film. There's nothing says you have to stay in one lane. In fact, you shouldn't. You should keep your palette of film love wide and diverse and open. So, Raphael, inside the Art House, it's what it's called on YouTube. Where else can they follow you for your stuff? Any projects coming up that you want to plug? By all means, where can they find your stuff at?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to find only in theaters, it is on Amazon and you can find it there. If you as an actor, I have a whole bunch of stuff that I'm doing. I'm in a new Paul Mescal movie called History of Sound, which is coming out. It's going to open in Cannes this year. A wonderful cringe comedy with Paul Rudd called Friendship that'll be out in theaters. There's an HBO series by the writer who did Mayor of Easttown, and it's called Task with Mark Ruffalo. That'll be out later this year, and a bunch of others. And
Sure.
I just did The Diplomat, and I'm working on a new show called The Beast in Me with Matthew Rhys. Anyway, I'm grateful to be a working actor, and there's been wonderful work that's come my way. It's always good to have a passion project, kind of like you, right?
Yep.
Good to have something. You do the things to keep the lights on, and then you do the things that kind of fill your soul, and your heart. So that's what this is. That's what Inside the Art House is.
Fantastic. So check it out, folks. I'll have links to everything for Raphael in the body of this podcast. I thank you, Raphael, for taking time. And yeah, folks, support indie cinema.